Physical violence by 4 women. I want to bring in the players now. CNN senior media correspondent Brian Stelter is here, political commentator Bakari Sellers, and CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, a former federal prosecutor. Again, Brian, this is a fast-moving story. Many of the details just developing now. Of course, he is resigning. The women accusing him, Schneiderman, of non-consensual physical violence hours after the story broke. The governor asked him to resign, and he is resigning tonight. Breaking news.
Yes, a public official who in public was an outspoken proponent of the Me Too movement, who has brought a lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein, his brother Bob, and the Weinstein Company, who has been trying to drive a path forward for New York State as an opponent to the Trump administration. All of that is the context for tonight's shocking developments. It took exactly 3 hours from the time the New Yorker published a story with allegations of physical abuse by Schneiderman. 2 women on the record, 2 other women speaking or sharing details anonymously through the 2 on the record women. Bottom line, Don, 4 women accusing this man of physical abuse. His response is that it was always consensual sex, but this is not just about sex. These allegations are about abuse. They are about violence that actually led to some of these women going to the hospital. Bottom line, 3 hours after the story hits, he resigns. I'm told the work of the office, the AG's office, will continue. That's an important point to keep in mind. The lawsuits, the work against Trump, all that continues. But the man on the top, he's gone.
Yeah. He tweeted out something earlier, but then an official statement. Here it is. He said, "It has been my great honor and privilege to serve as Attorney General for the people of the state of New York. In the last several hours, serious allegations, which I strongly contest, have been made against me. While these allegations are unrelated to my professional conduct of the operations of my office or the operations of my office, they will effectively prevent me from leading the office's work at this criminal time. I therefore resign my office effective at the close of business on May 8th, 2018.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
He is in a situation here, a prominent Democrat, a rising star in the Democratic Party, who clearly saw no way out of this situation. Yeah. Whether he acknowledges, whether he admits to these allegations or not, or whether he contests them, as he says he's saying he is, he saw no way forward. With the governor calling for his resignation, other prominent New York officials calling for his resignation, the path was clear. This was a bombshell story by the New Yorker. Jane Mayer and Ronan Farrow. Farrow, of course, known for his reporting on Harvey Weinstein. Yeah. That office was now investigating Weinstein, but Schneiderman will no longer be leading that.
Since we're talking about the governor calling and asking him to resign, Laura, we'll get to the legal part of this in a moment, but politically, how might this play out?
Well, it actually moved very quickly. We talked about the 3 hours from the story, but
yeah.
Governor Cuomo came out. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it is election season, but he came out extremely quickly, followed by Senator Gillibrand, who has been a hero for a lot of individuals during this new Me Too era. This, however, is slightly different because of the way that it was described with such great detail in the New Yorker story. This type of physical abuse and the lack of a denial by the Attorney General, simply saying this was role play, is no excuse for balling up your fist and punching somebody when they rebuff you, or, you know, having a young lady's ear bleed while you're having sex. I mean, that is beyond perverse, that is beyond wild, and that's unacceptable. And I'll let Laura comment on this. It's probably a crime. And so we have to understand that this is more. This is allegations of domestic violence, physical abuse, and assault and battery by the sitting Attorney General as of right now. And by the way, the last thing is we're talking about this cascading PR. I don't know who told me it would be a good day to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
There is no reason to prolong this. If you're going to pull the Band-Aid off, rip it off now and go home.
Let's talk about the legal angle here, Laura, and I want to read some of the descriptions from the New Yorker as we get to that. A 4th woman, an attorney who has held prominent positions in the New York legal community, says that Schneiderman made an advance toward her. When she rebuffed him, he slapped her across the face with such force that it left a mark that lingered the next day. She recalls screaming in surprise and pain and beginning to cry, and says that she felt frightened. She also asked to remain unidentified, but shared a photograph of the injury with the New Yorker. So, I mean, in no way does that sound consensual. Could he face legal charges, Laura?
Of course he could. You know, part of this story involves trying to confirm the reports and the allegations that are made. And of course, the number one question you're going to have if you're trying to prosecute these as assault, as battery, if possibly more for any non-consensual behavior, you're going to have to figure out, were there any police reports filed or other ways to corroborate? She says she has a photograph of the injuries taken contemporaneously with when it actually happened. all that's going to be used in a case if there is one to be built against his actual former attorney general. The reason it's all very important is because, as you see in many cases, he said, she said, she said, she said, he said cases. It's all about who can corroborate what and when they report it. And unfortunately, in this country, a lot of weight and emphasis is put on the timing and the timeliness of your reporting. And if you fail to do so, it can be a harder case for a prosecutor to pursue. In any event, however, the idea that there's a perpetrator in charge of one of the most prominent sexual assault cases in the country, Harvey Weinstein, or somebody who is in a position who just was named a champion of women, and someone who says if a woman has no control over her body, she has no power, all quotes by this now former AG, well, you've got more than just a court of public opinion. You've got a duplicitous nature that's going to go against him in any court proceeding, and no one's going to assign him any level of credibility if he's engaged in this sort of non-consensual, disturbing, and perverse behavior.
Yeah.
So let me just read the statement. This was his initial statement, Laura. He said, in the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. I have never engaged in non-consensual sex, which is a line I would not cross. But the reporting from the New Yorker also describes a former girlfriend who says not all of the abuse took place during sexual encounters. Schneiderman reportedly slapped his girlfriend during an argument. How does that change any argument that slapping someone was a sexual proclivity?
Well, it's very odd that he would parse it out the way that he did, that he had never engaged in non-consensual sex. That's the line he would not cross. But apparently, assault is not one in which he would vehemently deny the allegations in. He would simply say he vehemently contests the allegations. A very interesting legal term to talk about, maybe because he has his eyes towards a defamation case, or perhaps other things about calling somebody a lie or their actual statements to be untruthful. But what that says to me is that he has legal counsel, and he himself, by the way, the top dog lawyer in New York, should know enough not to make a blanket assertion or statement that he could use against him later. So he parsed it out in a very careful way. But legally speaking, that you didn't commit non-consensual sex, which is known as rape in other people's worlds, is not enough to say that you did not commit the other crimes that you were accused of, including the slapping, making the woman's ear bleed, and also a very important one, the threats. There's allegations in the report that there were threats made that if they were to go forward, that there would be wiretapping on their phones. I believe it reports in there. There would be repercussions in many ways. And remember, this is an allegation that many women and men who have contested proceedings against, say, a person in law enforcement, an officer, or somebody in the court system, will often feel as though they have no recourse. No one will believe them, and they will be punished in some way, shape, or form. Imagine that being the top lawyer in New York.
But they, according to the New Yorker, they were inspired, they say, by women who had been coming forward as part of the Me Too movement, Brian. And I'm just wondering how much these two women speaking on the record, how much more credibility does that add to this story?
I was really struck by what one of those two women said, Michelle Manning Barris. She was dating Schneiderman for a while. They believe they broke up in 2015. She Instagrammed a month ago before the story came out. She said, I feel a wave of truth coming, purging those who should not be in positions of power. Women are rising up and they've had enough. We must end this cycle of abuse of power and sexual violence. And that's the difference involving this story. From all the Me Too accounts we've heard, all the allegations against prominent men, it has primarily been about sexual assault and sexual harassment. In this case, Schneiderman is also accused of abusing his power and acting in violent ways separate from any sexual activity. And that is one of the reasons why this story stood out, why it is so disgusting to read. Again, these are only allegations made by two women on the record, two other women who are speaking anonymously. But when it adds up, you can see it added up so in such a damaging way that these other prominent New York officials quickly called for his
allegedly
removal.
using the power of his office to retaliate against these women if they move forward.
Well, you can't separate the politics from this case of abuse, which is we oftentimes want to just be able to sit back and listen to the victims and listen to their stories. But in this case, with Schneiderman, you cannot separate the politics from it. Yeah. The politics of how quickly those elected officials responded. And again, I go back to the fact that Governor Cuomo is in a tight race, or a tougher than expected race, with a female, Cynthia Nixon, who has been uplifting women throughout the state of New York and been running an awesome campaign. And so he's compelled to move quicker as well. Senator Gillibrand, this is her bread and butter issue. So she's compelled to move quickly as well. And so now you have a political firestorm. You have the person who has been for lack of a better term, he has been the worst enemy for Donald Trump when it comes to
a
issues.
nemesis, that's right.
Nemesis, day in and day out.
Yeah.
And so the question now is, how does Donald Trump respond? Somebody who has,
Donald
bevy,
Trump Jr. is already attacking
a bevy of sexual assault allegations and victims, and the list goes on and on and on. And then you have the last thing, which people really don't want to talk about today, but it's going to happen. If it's not happening right now, it will happen tomorrow. It is, what is Hakeem Jeffries going to do? Who's going to be the next person to run? You know, all of these things come to play when we have these discussions.
Yeah,
but
will
right
it be
now,
Preet Bharara or someone else?
That's got to be the last.